Okay, well, thanks for having me here, Francis and Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. Really excited about this. I will say up front, I am the least expert of the entire panel. So I definitely am not a historian nor an expert. I am a practicing architect and a researcher. My research, however, deals with computation and parametric design and digital fabrication in contemporary architecture, which is not what I'm going to be talking about. But what I do is I am Chinese American, and I do have the last name Huang, which actually, by Chinese characters, is the same as the last name Wong, just different is Mandarin versus Cantonese. So Jin Wong is not related to me, but is a predecessor from USC that works with focusing on the expressions of technology in at that time contemporary architecture, thinking about how technology and popular culture were influencing the sort of visual culture of the time and expression of that through the built environment. So I think most of you are familiar with this building, the theme building at LAX, built in 1961. When it was built, this is what it looked like. There was not much around it, right? It was the theme building by itself as this spectacular kind of flying saucer hovering over LAX. It was produced as a consortium, William Pereira Luckman architects with Beckett, as well as Paul Revere Williams. That consortium was led by Gin Wong as the chief architect. However, going back to the stories untold thing, what we don't know, or most of us don't know, is that this actually was not the original design. The original design was actually a huge dome in the center of the airport with a series of satellite wings. And those satellite wings in this kind of glass atrium was determined to be inefficient in terms of the air conditioning that was going to be required, as well as concerns about its structural stability for earthquakes. And so they pulled back on the scheme, and as a kind of final nod to remember it, they built the theme building. And so the theme building was a sort of recognition of that original design. And that original design was a larger story. By the way, these images come from a book called Never Built Los Angeles by my good friend Sam LaBelle. Fantastic, fantastic book. But really, and Alan being the sort of expert on this subject, it was a great example of Googie architecture. And Googie architecture really being a kind of expression of that moment, and this moment being a context which America was dealing with the space race and thinking about the space age, and that was infecting popular culture and visual culture in the country. So if you think about what's happening with car design, what's happening with the Jetsons, which was launched the year after the theme building was opened. It really was something that was an expression of the moment and a kind of zeitgeist that was going through contemporary culture. But one of the things that happened for me in terms of beginning to research this, I will also be guilty in saying that I submitted my presentation at about 2 o'clock this morning. My presentation started off talking about Jin Wong, Charles Wong, and a number of other Chinese American architects. And as I started digging into it, I realized there was so much I wanted to talk about with Jin Wong alone, but not just about Jin Wong alone. What you'll see now is the rest of this presentation will go 3 slides all at the same time. Jin Wong, Asian American history, modern architectural history, all at the same time. Right? And so Jin Wong was born in Guangzhou, China, in a village, September 15th, 1922. At the same time, 1924, Asian Exclusion Act excludes all Asian labor immigrants from entering into the United States. And similar time, 1919, the Bauhaus started. Walter Gropius, modernism is born. But that 1924 was predated by a whole series of anti-Asian legacies, or legislations, right? So, which included something really, really tragic, which was the 1871 Los Angeles Chinatown Massacre, the largest race massacre in the history of this country. So in one day, 10% of the Chinese American population of Los Angeles was wiped out. A mob of over 500 people came in, murdered them. A number of acts, this one probably being the most important, 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, which was basically the only time in American history that a single ethnic group is singled out and barred from entry and barred from naturalized citizenship. He enters 1932, 1932, Port of Los Angeles. What's important here is he's coming in the height of the Great Depression. During the Great Depression, as is typical in all of these moments, where the chips are down, anti-Asian sentiments become very strong as scapegoats for a lot of the issues that are happening. In particular, Filipino farm workers are being targeted, but at the same time, the Neutra VDL house going up in Silver Lake. Amazing expression of modernism. If you look closely, this is actually the document that Gin Wong entered the country with. It actually articulates that he is the child of an existing merchant in Los Angeles, and that is why he's able to come, because he's the child of someone who's already here, and that person is a merchant, and he's coming to help support them in that work. He actually was not, so he was coming in as a paper son. His mother put him down as a paper son of a friend who was here, and that was how he was able to gain entry into the country. He goes to John H. Francis Polytechnic High School, same high school that Paul Revere Williams went to. Also important to note here, because it is one of the few high schools in Los Angeles that is not segregated. And that is why he goes out to the valley from Los Angeles. Chinese were only allowed to live in certain areas of Los Angeles at that time, which was all in the area of what is now the Fashion District, Old Chinatown. At the same time, when he graduates, 1942, is the same time World War II is happening and Japanese are interned, right? So though Gin Wong is Chinese, not Japanese, there's obviously clearly a lot of sentiments that are going on in the general population. And meanwhile, 1939, Johnson Wax headquarters inspired a departure of Frank Lloyd Wright's legacy, where he starts to get into more organic kind of curvilinear architecture happening. And really, really kind of fascinating series of kind of a birth of a kind of more, a nod to streamline modern in the work of Frank Lloyd Wright. Gin Wong becomes a citizen, volunteers for World War II, becomes a radar operator and a bombardier. He becomes a citizen because of the Magnuson Act, 1943. He becomes one of the first people to take advantage of the Magnuson Act, which is the repeal of the ability for Chinese Americans to become naturalized citizens. Same year he becomes a citizen, he enlists, goes to fight the war in Japan. So he flies as a pilot or as a bombardier, multiple bombing missions over Japan, receives honorable discharge, leaves. Right around then, 1945, John Estenza, Arts and Architecture magazine, the case study movement begins, thinking about post-war architecture and post-war living for military men returning from the war. He goes to the USC School of Architecture because of that experience in the war. That experience in the war, he's making posters for his battalion. He's involved in a lot of design efforts within the troop, and one of his superiors says, "You should go to architecture school. You're really good at this." So he comes back, goes to USC School of Architecture, follows in the footsteps of Paul Revere Williams once again, as well as a number of other people here in this audience, Miller being one of them. Hi, Miller. One of his faculty at that time is William Pereira, who is one of the faculty at USC. When he graduates, Pereira brings him in, hires him right away, he's one of his star pupils, brings him in. But at the same time, the Korean War begins. And again, this kind of ongoing sentiment of anti-Asian kind of belief and scapegoating continues because of the Korean War. And similarly, modernism continues. The Farnsworth House is launched. Another kind of play on thinking about the removal of all ornament and the streamlining of architecture. And then 1952, Gin Wong delivers his first major project for Pereira Associates, the CBS Television City, Christopher Hawthorne called it a kind of glowing cube, like a television set facing the city. And at the same time, the McCarran-Walter Act lifts the ban on Korean and Japanese immigration, which allows them into the country, and Brown versus Board of Education, now schools are desegregated for the first time. And similarly, at the same time here in Palm Springs, we have the first Frey house, not the second one. So everybody knows the second one up here, which is the beautiful house with the rock in the center. But the first one, which was actually sold and then torn down by a developer to make way for tract developments, was the first of those. And so that's actually Albert Frey there with his beautiful Corvette, sitting in front of his house, which started off it was a series of additions to this one house. Beautiful, beautiful house, no longer in existence. And then 1965, this is probably the most signature building that Gin Wong has, which is Jack Hawker's Union 76 in Beverly Hills, originally designed for LAX. So it was actually part of the original design for LAX, and it was meant to be a gas station in LAX. LAX decided not to sell a gas station, and I actually didn't know they did this kind of thing, but it was unbuilt, and they put the design up for auction. And Union 76 bought the design in the auction and placed it in Beverly Hills. And so this is, let's say, signature Googie style, the upward sweeping roof, very much expressed again here in Palm Springs. At the exact same time, the tramway gas station, again by Albert Frey, and now the Visitor Center. And at that same time is the Immigration Act of 1965, which then opened the doors to aspiring professionals of Asian origin, not for anybody, not for laborers, but for people who were coming to study for college. And so the key designation there is that's how I got here, because that's how my parents got here. So without that act, I wouldn't be here. And so my parents came here to study, actually my father came and studied architecture. He never practiced, but somehow infected me and didn't dissuade me enough. I'm still here. And so the work of Gin Wong, I think, as a whole, has expanded. We know the theme building, we know the 76 station, CBS television tower. This is Los Angeles City Center, the Arco Tower, Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco. There's a whole lot of this work that's out there. All of it, I would say, has the ability, and something that he's taken from his sort of Eastern heritage, which is this ability to kind of condense things down into one singular gesture, one big, powerful gesture. And I would say that's the sort of trademark of what Gin Wong does, is everything is one big, bold gesture. There's a lot of other things happening, but the big, bold gesture is what carries it through. And there was a lot of success here, and obviously a lot that he overcame. And as a society, we've obviously clearly overcome a lot as well. And I think right now, it's easy for me to look at it and say that right now we have probably the biggest impact on popular mainstream media that we've ever had as Asian Americans. We are now winning Oscars. We're now doing Crazy Rich Asians. We now have TV series. We have comedians and all of that. But at the same time, this past year, we have had a 339% increase in anti-Asian hate crimes. There was, in the last year, 10,279 hate crimes reported against Asians. And so that's reported, not everybody reports it. And also there's a lot of reports where they say you can't prove that it's a hate crime, right? It's just a crime and you happen to be Asian. So I think it's very clear that these stories untold are important, but I think what's more important to think about is not just the story, but the context of the story. And so like Gin Wong's success doesn't only happen because of his success, it's actually about what he's overcome in the context of the sort of forces that he's acting within. Anyways, thank you.